Right, today we're going to be talking about Disc in Mythic Dungeons on the BFA beta. So I've gotten the opportunity recently to be doing a lot of Mythic Dungeons on the BFA beta. I got to 120 very recently, and we went basically straight into Heroics and then straight into Mythic Dungeons with two friends of mine, and then just plugging everybody else. So it hasn't been, a complete stomp with a 5-man pre-made group, but it has been fairly successful so far. Now, to give you an idea, we started out probably at like 280 item level, and Heroic Dungeons drop 325 item level gear. I'm currently 322 item level, and Mythic Dungeons, so the content we've been doing, which is what you see in the gameplay in the background, drops item level 340 gear. So we've been extremely under geared while doing the majority of this content. So what you see here is probably going to be a good representation of what a decently hard dungeon is going to be like when BFA comes out. So now to go over what's good about Disc at the moment, I kind of want to address what's bad about Disc in the live servers currently, and why they're not a strong healer in Mythic Plus when being able to damage to do healing effectively is such a powerful tool in a timed environment. So the issues with Disc in live at the moment is that compared to Druids and Paladins, their damage is actually fairly low. Now this happens because Disc actually needs to use a lot more globals to heal people than what its counterpart healers would. So for example, a Paladin can press Beacon of Light and Holy Shock and heal the entire party, whereas a Disc, to heal that entire party, might need to use their Radiance, use Penance, and finish up with a couple Smites. If you're out of Radiance charges, or you need to apply atonements, you need to go then spend 5 globals to apply atonements to those targets. So you end up spending a lot more time applying atonements than actually doing damage. And what actually happens, and if you don't believe me, you can go have a look at the recent MDI, is that as a disciplined priest healer, you're actually going to be doing less damage than what a Druid and Paladin can in a seamless scenario. And that's just because Druids and Paladins just have to spend less globals to do healing. To top the group, they just have to spend less time healing, which means they can spend more time DPSing. So another issue that Disc has is that its healing is very periodic. Outside of Radiance charges, it's you spend a lot of globals applying atonement and then to do healing, and because of this, you're healing yo-yos between doing really high amounts of healing, when you're casting, when you've got Penance and 5 atonements out, and then in your low periods when you're applying atonements. Now, obviously you don't have three to four other healers in your party to lean back on, so periodic healing potentially could be really detrimental to your success in a dungeon. The other issue Disc has at the moment in Mythic Plus is that you have a lot of dead globals, so Plea and Powered Shield relatively just don't do a lot of healing, and if you're using them to apply spells, they're just not impactful. Right now, there has been changes to address that, but when you're playing Disc on the live servers, and you have to run around applying Plea and Atonement, you're just really not doing anything at that point in time. Another issue that Disc has alive is they have low utility. Now, that's not to say that their toolkit is lacking, it's just that their toolkit doesn't get utilized in the Mythic Plus system. We have some really niche tools like Dominant Mind and Master Spell, but really, if we have a look at the spread of dungeons, there's not really that many dungeons you go, gee, if we had a Disciplined Priest here, this would be a lot easier. A lot of the core utility that you need for a lot of the dungeons isn't on the Priest toolkit. And the last point is the low survivability of Disciplined Priest. They just don't have a defensive cooldown. They're the only class in the game that doesn't have a defensive cooldown, and it's it shows in high level keys for sure. Now, that's all the changes on Disc in live, but in the BFA beta, a lot of these have been addressed, and a lot of them have been turned into positives. So The two biggest things I think that have come to Disc is the change of mastery and the change to remove plea and replace it with powered shield. And what this has effectively meant is that you have a lot more impactful globals, and the way that the BFA dungeons are shaping up is that a lot of the mobs are very disruptful. Like you'll get pulled into melee a lot. You'll get stunned or silenced or knocked back a lot in a lot of the dungeons. So having powered shield be an impactful global that's an instant cast, and penance being able to be cast on the move is very advantageous. I was playing Mistweaver and Holy Pally for quite a while, and healing on them was really hard when it came to some of the big pulls we were doing, and there were just a lot of mobs that would just stop you from casting. On Disciplined Priests and Resto Druids, you just don't have that issue, and in the live servers you do, because powered shield and just isn't that impactful. If you're getting knocked around, thrown around, doing all this stuff, and you need to cast powered shield on a couple different people, you're going to be applying atonement for later, and you're also going to be doing a decent amount of healing, just because they've scaled powered shield to actually do a decent amount of healing now. The other change is that mastery has now been changed to affect your Shadowmend, Penance, and powered shield healing. Now these are all your three most effective spells in Mythic Plus. They're essentially your three core abilities that you're going to be using. So the fact that your mastery now directly affects what you're going to be doing in Mythic Plus is really nice, and it also gives you a strong single target spell in Shadowmend if you want to be stacking a lot of mastery. In the live servers, obviously mastery just affects the amount of atonement healing you're doing, and when stuff gets rough in a 5-man, you're just sitting there spamming Shadowmend, your mastery is not doing anything for you. So it's really good to see that mastery is now being turned into a stat that's going to be directly helpful in all aspects of Mythic Plus. So that's a very positive change. The other thing that's really good for Disc at the moment is that how the Mythic Plus, the Mythic Dungeon meta has it's changed. Now this isn't to say it won't change in the future, because it could very well happen, is that a lot of your as a healer, you actually need to heal now in dungeons. So a lot of the abilities, you don't just have you don't have Blood DK Leech Aura and stuff like that to just heal the party, and a lot of the bosses have a lot of healing to be done. Now because of this, your unique utility as a Disciplined Priest to do damage, to do healing, really shines through. And what you'll find is that you're no longer able to do a significant amount of DPS as healers, like Resto Druids and Holy Palladies, for example. They can't spare the globals to be doing DPS spells, which means their damage on the end of boss fights is very low. Disc doesn't have that issue. They're going to be doing the DPS spells regardless, so you're going to be doing high damage anyway. Another thing that's quite interesting that you might not have realized if you haven't played on the BFA Alpha is how impactful purges are going to be. So a lot of the mobs in all of the dungeons have things that need to get purged, or purging the mobs is a significant help to you. And why this is really good is that it makes it's going to directly buff some of the lower performing healers, specifically shamans and priests. If you're able to run into a pack and use your utility as a purge, to reduce the amount of damage a mob is going to do by 50%, or remove the huge absorb shield on the mob, that might be a reason why you would specifically want to be bringing shamans and priests to these mythic dungeons. Right now, there's not really any unique utility a Disciplined Priest brings to a dungeon. There's no dungeon I can think of where Master Spell is really effective, and that you kind of think when you're forming a group to do a Mythic Key, it's like, oh gee, maybe I'll bring a priest here because they can Master Spell mechanic XYZ. That's not a thing in the Legion Beta, and that's just because there isn't an emphasis on purgeable mechanics. Just because of that shift, that's inherently just going to make priests and shamans a lot stronger. So there's another advantage that Discipline's been given going forward. Now, with all these changes, I truly do believe that Discipline's going to be one of the strongest contenders in Mythic Plus, and I would be almost confident in saying that it'll be the strongest healer, and that's just because of how its toolkit has kind of been adapted to really push it into this Mythic environment. You can see in the footage in the background that we were actually able to four-man a Mythic Dungeon boss, as 4 very under-geared players. Now this boss isn't particularly easy, I wouldn't say it's particularly hard either, but a lot of the contributing factor to that was the fact that I'm able to do 60% of the DPS of what a DPS would be doing. So that's just an example of where Disc is super can be very advantageous. Anyway, this video has been long enough already. I hope you learned something about Discipline Priest and my thoughts on Discipline Priest in the BFA Alpha. Thanks for watching and have a good one.